She stood at his door and whispered, "My baby died, can I love yours?" He said, "She needs you too." Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small, empty crib in her room. The soft white sheets were folded neatly, but they only reminded her of what was missing. Her tiny daughter had been gone for a week, and the silence in the house felt heavier than any weight she had ever carried. She could still remember the day she first held her baby in her arms. Her daughter had looked so fragile, so perfect, and Sarah had promised to love her forever. But life had been cruel, and in one instant, everything she had hoped for vanished. She hugged herself tightly, trying to feel something other than pain. Tears ran down her face, and for a moment she thought she might never stop crying. Friends had called and sent messages, but Sarah could not bring herself to answer. How could they understand? They had never felt this kind of loss, never held a tiny life that had been gone before it could even begin. The world outside her window seemed alive, with children playing in the park and mothers laughing with their babies, but Sarah felt trapped in a bubble of sorrow. Days passed slowly. Sarah stopped eating properly. She wandered through the house as if she were a ghost, going from one room to another without really noticing anything. Her parents tried to visit, but she asked them to leave, not wanting to explain the pain that words could not reach. Nights were worse. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her daughter's tiny hands, her tiny face, her soft little cries. Sleep was impossible, and when she did manage to drift off, she woke with a start, screaming into the empty darkness. One evening, as Sarah sat alone on the couch, she thought about how lonely she had become. She had loved her baby more than anything, and now there was nothing. She had once believed that her life had a clear purpose, that she would guide this little child through the world. But now she felt hollow. She wondered if she would ever feel joy again, if she could ever smile without a shadow of guilt hanging over her. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, David was living his own quiet struggle. He had lost his wife 2 years ago, leaving him to raise their daughter Lily on his own. David's days were busy, filled with work and errands, but his heart carried a constant ache. He loved his daughter with all his soul, but he missed the warmth of a partner, someone to share the joys and worries of life. Every night he kissed Lily goodnight and whispered stories of her mother, trying to keep her memory alive while shielding his daughter from his own loneliness. David's home was filled with the echoes of the past. Photographs of his wife smiled from the walls, and Lily's toys were scattered across the living room. He kept moving, kept working, because he could not stop for grief. But there were moments, brief and sudden, when he felt the emptiness pressing in. He longed for companionship, for someone who could understand the depth of his love and loss, someone who could share the quiet, ordinary moments that made life meaningful. One chilly autumn afternoon, Sarah made a decision. She could no longer stay trapped in her grief. She needed someone, to remind her that love could still exist in the world. She remembered meeting David once at a mutual friends gathering months ago. He had been kind, gentle, and patient with his little daughter. For reasons she could not fully explain, she felt drawn to him. Not in a romantic way, but in a desperate need to share the love she still carried inside her, even though her heart had been broken. Her hands trembled as she walked to David's house. The streets were lined with golden leaves, swirling in the wind, and she felt a strange mix of hope and fear. What would he think of her? Would he turn her away? Would he judge her for the emptiness she carried? Each step seemed heavier than the last, but she forced herself forward, remembering the tiny life she had loved so deeply. She could not give her baby a future, but maybe she could give her love to someone else. When she reached the door, Sarah hesitated. Her heart pounded as if it might burst from her chest. She raised her hand and knocked softly. The sound echoed in the quiet house, and for a moment she felt frozen. Then she heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, and there he was, David, standing in front of her, surprised and cautious. His eyes, a calm shade of brown, studied her carefully. He sensed the sorrow radiating from her, and for a moment words seemed unnecessary. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "My baby died, can I love yours?" The words felt heavy in the air, carrying all the pain she had lived through. David's eyes widened and he stepped back slightly, unsure of how to respond. He had never heard such raw honesty before, and it took him a moment to gather his thoughts. She looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. I just want to help. I want to love a child. I don't want to replace anyone. Her voice broke and she could not finish. She could only stand there, trembling, hoping he would understand. David took a deep breath. He had seen sadness before in himself and others, but there was something in Sarah's expression that touched him deeply. He thought about Lily, about the little girl who had been missing the warmth of a motherly presence. He thought about his own loneliness, about the empty evenings and quiet mornings that seemed to stretch endlessly. And in that moment, he realized that maybe Sarah's love could be a gift, not just for Lily but for both of them. "She needs you too," he said quietly, opening the door a little wider. His voice was calm, but there was a softness in it that made Sarah feel a small spark of hope. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and stepped inside. The warmth of the house felt comforting, as if it had been waiting for her presence. David led her to the living room, where Lily was playing with her blocks on the carpet. The little girl looked up at Sarah with curious eyes, unaware of the complexities of adult life. Sarah knelt slowly, unsure of what to do, and held out her hands. Lily took them, and in that simple moment a connection was formed. Sarah felt her heart stir with a warmth she had not felt in weeks. It was not the same as holding her own child, but it was a start of healing, a start of a new possibility. They spent the afternoon together in quiet companionship. Sarah read a small story to Lily, her voice soft and tender. David watched them, feeling a mixture of relief and gratitude. He could see that Sarah's love was gentle, patient, and kind. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, life could offer moments of joy again. As evening fell, Sarah prepared to leave. She stood at the door, looking back at David and Lily. "Thank you," she whispered. For letting me be here." David nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "We're glad you're here," he said simply. "She needs love, and so do you." Walking back through the quiet streets, Sarah felt a strange lightness. The grief had not vanished. It was still there, a shadow in her heart. But for the first time, she felt that it could be carried, that it could exist alongside something new and meaningful. She thought about her baby, about the love she had once held, and realized that love does not disappear. It only changes form. That night, Sarah went to bed and allowed herself to rest without guilt. She dreamed of tiny hands, of laughter, and of hope. And somewhere in the distance, she felt the first stirrings of a life moving forward slowly, gently, into the light. Sarah returned to her small apartment feeling a strange mixture of relief and nervousness. The walk back had been quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional rustling of leaves. Her heart still raced from what had happened at David's house. She had expected rejection, maybe even anger, but instead she had been welcomed. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. The next morning she woke to the familiar ache in her chest. Grief was still there, sharp and unyielding, but it no longer felt like a prison. She remembered the way David had said, "She needs you too." Those words had touched something deep inside her, a part that still longed to give love. She thought about Lily, small, curious, full of life, and she realized that perhaps this little girl could help her heal. Sarah decided to visit again. She didn't know what to expect, but the idea of connecting with life again was too strong to ignore. She called David first, her hands trembling as she dialed his number. "Hello," he answered. His voice was calm, steady, yet there was an unspoken question in it. Sarah explained that she wanted to come over if that was okay. David hesitated for a moment but then agreed. He could sense her sincerity and knew that Lily, too, could benefit from her gentle presence. When Sarah arrived, she felt the familiar nervousness. David opened the door, and she stepped inside, greeted by the smell of warm bread and the faint scent of lavender from Lily's shampoo. The little girl was sitting on the carpet with her blocks, humming a tune. Lily's eyes lit up when she saw Sarah, and she crawled toward her, holding out a small wooden block as if offering a gift. Sarah smiled, kneeling down carefully so as not to startle her. "Thank you," she said softly, taking the block. "It's beautiful." Lily giggled, a pure, joyful sound, and Sarah felt her heart soften a little more. It was not the same as holding her own baby, but the feeling of being needed, of being able to give love, was powerful in a way she hadn't expected. David watched from the kitchen doorway, leaning slightly against the frame. He could see the careful way Sarah interacted with Lily. She was patient, gentle, and attentive. For the first time, he felt that maybe he had made the right choice in letting her into their lives. There was no rush, no pressure, just simple moments of connection, small acts of kindness that mattered more than words could ever express. Over the next few days, Sarah visited more often. Sometimes she came in the morning to help get Lily ready for preschool. Other times she stayed in the afternoons, reading stories or playing games. David noticed how naturally Lily responded to her. The little girl would run to Sarah, ask her to tie her shoes or brush her hair. Sarah had never thought she could feel warmth again, and yet, being with Lily, she discovered a spark of life returning to her heart. Despite the growing closeness, both Sarah and David experienced moments of hesitation. Sarah still carried the deep pain of losing her baby. There were times when she would sit quietly in the corner, staring at the floor, and tears would come unbidden. She worried that Lily would be hurt if she became too involved, worried that her own grief might overshadow the little girl's happiness. David noticed these moments and quietly gave her space. He understood the fragility of grief, having felt it himself when his wife had passed. He didn't want to force anything, but he wanted Sarah to feel welcome, to know that she had a place in their lives. One afternoon, he sat beside her on the couch, gently asking, "Are you okay?" Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. David didn't press. Instead, he offered a simple hand to hold, a silent gesture that spoke of understanding and patience. In these quiet moments, Sarah began to open up. She shared stories of her daughter, the little things she remembered, like the tiny fingers that had grasped her hand, the soft coos that had made her heart swell, and even the small cries that had woken her in the middle of the night. David listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes simply sitting in silence. He could see the love Sarah had carried, a love that had not disappeared even in the face of tragedy. One rainy afternoon, David suggested that they all bake cookies together. Lily jumped with excitement, and Sarah felt a small thrill of anticipation she hadn't felt in weeks. They measured flour, cracked eggs, and stirred dough, laughing when a little spill sent flour flying across the counter. Lily clapped her hands, delighted, and Sarah found herself smiling, genuinely smiling, as she watched the child she had come to care for so deeply. Through these small, shared experiences, Sarah and David began to form a rhythm. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations of affection, just simple moments that built trust and connection. Sarah learned to read Lily's cues, understanding when she wanted comfort or when she wanted to play. David watched as Sarah's grief slowly softened, replaced with the beginnings of hope. He realized that sharing their lives did not diminish his daughter's memory or love. It added a new layer of life and warmth that they all needed. Sarah also began to reconnect with the world outside their little circle. She started answering messages from her parents, attending small gatherings with friends, and even taking short walks in the park. Each time she returned home, she felt a sense of purpose waiting for her. Being with Lily reminded her that life, even after heartbreak, could still hold moments of beauty and meaning. Yet, there were challenges. Sometimes, Sarah would feel the sharp sting of grief when she saw a newborn in the park or heard a baby cry nearby. She would retreat into herself, afraid that her sadness might overwhelm Lily. David noticed these moments and reassured her quietly. "It's okay to feel," he said gently. "We all carry our memories. Loving Lily doesn't mean forgetting your baby." Sarah nodded, comforted by his words. It was the first time she felt that her love could expand, that grief and joy could coexist. As weeks passed, the bond between Sarah and Lily deepened. Lily began to seek her out, holding her hand when she wanted to walk somewhere or snuggling close when she was tired. Sarah's heart swelled with affection, and she began to see a path forward for herself. She was not replacing her daughter, but she was learning that her heart had room for love again. David, too, felt a quiet shift. He had been cautious at first, wary of opening his life to someone new. But seeing Sarah care for Lily, watching the tender moments they shared, he felt a sense of peace. He understood that healing did not happen in a single moment. It was a slow, steady process, built on trust, patience, and small acts of love. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with warm shades of orange and pink, the three of them sat together on the living room floor. Lily was drawing pictures with crayons, Sarah was gently guiding her hand, and David watched from the sofa, smiling. There was a sense of calm, a feeling that for the first time in a long while, they were all where they belonged. Sarah looked at Lily and whispered softly, "You are so special, little one." Lily giggled, not fully understanding the weight of the words, but feeling the warmth behind them. Sarah felt a small tear run down her cheek, a mix of sadness and joy, and she realized that this was what it meant to heal, to carry the memory of what had been lost while embracing what could still grow. David approached, sitting beside her. "Thank you for being here," he said quietly. "It means a lot to both of us." Sarah nodded, feeling the connection strengthen between them. She realized that love could take many forms and that sometimes the most unexpected bonds could bring the greatest comfort. That night, as Sarah walked home, the streets glistening from the rain, she felt a renewed sense of hope. The grief had not disappeared, but it no longer felt like a cage. She had found a way to carry her sorrow while opening her heart to new love and new life. She thought of Lily sleeping soundly, of David watching over them both, and she felt a quiet, steady warmth in her chest. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt that maybe life could be gentle again. Maybe love, even after loss, could find a way to grow. And as she lay down to rest, she allowed herself to dream not only of what had been lost, but of what could still bloom, a small, fragile hope that tomorrow could bring a new beginning. The days turned into weeks, and the little household settled into a gentle rhythm. Sarah had begun to feel more comfortable in David's home, and her visits were no longer hesitant or filled with nervous energy. She and Lily had grown close. The little girl would run to Sarah the moment she arrived, wrapping her small arms around her in a hug that spoke louder than words ever could. Sarah would laugh, feeling warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she thought she had lost forever. David watched the two of them interact, a quiet satisfaction in his chest. He had worried at first about introducing someone new into their lives, afraid it might disrupt the fragile balance they had maintained since his wife passed. But now he could see that Sarah's presence did not take away from his daughter's love, it added to it. Lily's laughter was brighter, her curiosity sharper, and even her quiet moments seemed fuller with Sarah around. Yet, life was never completely free of challenges. Sarah still struggled with waves of grief that hit without warning. Sometimes, a song on the radio, the sight of a stroller passing by, or even the smell of baby powder would bring her to tears. She would quietly excuse herself from the living room, retreating to the kitchen or bathroom until the feeling passed. David never questioned her. He had learned that grief could not be rushed or ignored. All he did was wait, giving her the space she needed while silently offering his support. One evening, Sarah found herself holding Lily in her lap while the little girl fell asleep after a long day of play. The room was quiet except for the soft rhythm of her breathing. Sarah's mind wandered to her own baby, imagining what her daughter might have looked like now, what little sounds she would have made, what games she might have enjoyed. The sadness was sharp, but it was softer now, more like a dull ache than a piercing pain. She kissed Lily gently on the forehead, whispering, "You are safe and loved, little one." And in that moment she felt a small thread of healing weave through her heart. David entered the room quietly, sitting on the arm of the couch. He watched Sarah hold Lily with such tenderness, a look of quiet devotion on her face. He could see how deeply Sarah loved, how genuine her care was. For a long moment he simply observed, then spoke softly. "She really loves you, you know." Sarah looked up, surprised by the gentle remark. "She does?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David nodded. "She trusts you, and that means a lot. It's not easy for her to let someone new into her life, not after everything she's been through." Sarah's eyes glistened. I want to make a difference, even if it's small," David smiled. "You already have." Over the following weeks, the bond between Sarah and Lily continued to grow. They baked cookies together, read storybooks, and even created small art projects. One rainy afternoon, they built a small cardboard castle, decorating it with stickers and crayons. Lily squealed with delight when Sarah crowned her as the princess of the castle, and Sarah found herself laughing until tears threatened to fall, not from grief, but from sheer joy. Still, Sarah's past loss lingered like a shadow. There were moments when she would pause, lost in thought, remembering her own daughter. Sometimes the sadness would come unexpectedly, and she would retreat to her quiet corner of the room. David noticed these moments and always responded with patience. "It's okay," he would say softly. "Take your time. We're here when you're ready." One day, Sarah decided to take Lily to the park, wanting to give the little girl a special treat. They walked hand in hand, the crisp air filling their lungs as leaves crunched beneath their feet. Lily ran ahead to the swings, giggling as Sarah pushed her gently back and forth. Watching her, Sarah felt a mix of happiness and sorrow. She remembered taking her own baby to the park, imagining days like this that would never come. But now, holding Lily's small hand, she realized that love could be shared without replacing anyone. It could exist alongside grief. David joined them after work, bringing Lily a small kite they could fly together. As they ran across the open field, the kite soaring high above, Sarah felt a strange lightness in her chest. For the first time in months, she felt as though the world might be kind again, even if just for a moment. The wind caught the kite, pulling it higher, and she laughed, the sound spilling freely from her lips. Even as these moments of joy flourished, Sarah and David faced deeper emotional challenges. One evening, Sarah received a call from her mother, who had been insisting that she attend a family gathering. The idea of facing relatives who would inevitably ask questions about her loss filled Sarah with anxiety. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready to be around so many people who might not understand the depth of her pain. David noticed her worry and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said. "But if you want to go, I'll be here to support you." Sarah nodded, grateful for his understanding. She decided to attend the gathering, taking comfort in knowing that David and Lily would be with her. The evening was difficult at first. Questions and sympathetic looks reminded her of what she had lost. But she realized that sharing her grief, even briefly, allowed her to release some of the heaviness she had been carrying alone. David and Lily's presence gave her strength, and she returned home feeling both exhausted and lighter, a small step forward in her healing journey. In the following weeks, Sarah began to open up more about her past. She shared stories of her daughter with David, sometimes laughing through tears, sometimes simply speaking in quiet tones. David listened without judgment, offering comfort when needed or silence when words were not enough. Their trust in each other deepened. Sarah began to understand that grief was not a barrier to love. It could coexist with it, teaching her to appreciate the moments of warmth and connection that still existed. One rainy afternoon, while David was at work, Sarah and Lily decided to have an indoor picnic. They spread a blanket on the living room floor, brought out sandwiches and juice, and pretended to be on an adventure in the forest. Lily's imagination was endless, and Sarah found herself swept up in it, laughing and playing without fear of judgment. In those moments, Sarah felt a profound sense of purpose. She was not replacing her daughter, but she was creating new memories, giving love to a child who needed it just as much as she needed to give it. As time went on, Sarah and David began to plan small outings together. They visited the zoo, took trips to the library, and explored quiet streets in their neighborhood. These excursions were simple, ordinary, yet they carried extraordinary meaning. Sarah felt herself healing with every shared laugh, every story told, every gentle hug. David, too, realized that opening his life to Sarah was not a risk, it was a gift. He could see how much Lily thrived with Sarah's presence, and he could feel his own heart lightening, filled with gratitude and trust. Even the quiet, ordinary evenings became precious. They would sit together on the couch, Sarah reading a story while David sipped his tea and Lily cuddled between them. The house was filled with warmth, the kind that comes not from grand gestures, but from love given and received consistently, gently, and without expectation. Sarah found herself reflecting on her own journey. The grief was still there, a part of her, but it no longer dominated every thought. She had learned that healing was not linear, it ebbed and flowed, but it could exist alongside joy. One evening, as Sarah helped Lily get ready for bed, she felt a deep sense of contentment. Lily climbed into her small bed, pulling her favorite stuffed animal clothes, and Sarah kissed her forehead. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered. Lily smiled sleepily, murmuring, "I love you, Sarah." The words struck Sarah profoundly. Love could exist again, she realized. It could grow from the smallest seeds, and sometimes it could blossom in the most unexpected ways. David peeked into the room, smiling softly at the sight. He had watched the quiet transformation in both Sarah and Lily, and he knew that the bonds they were forming were real, lasting, and filled with potential. For all the pain and loss they had experienced, there was hope now, tangible and present in the small acts of care and love that defined their days. As Sarah left that night, walking back through the quiet streets, the cool air brushing against her cheeks, she reflected on how far she had come. Grief was no longer a prison. It was a companion that reminded her of the depth of her love. And in its shadow, she had discovered something she thought she had lost forever: hope, connection, and the ability to give love again. Sarah knew the journey was not over. There would be difficult days ahead, moments when the pain of her loss would resurface. But now she understood that she did not have to face it alone. David and Lily had become a part of her life in a way that was gentle, steady, and healing. She realized that love, even after tragedy, could grow again, and that the bonds we form could carry us through the hardest times. As she drifted to sleep that night, she allowed herself to imagine the future, a future where grief and love could coexist, where loss did not erase joy, and where hope could bloom quietly, persistently, in the hearts of those willing to embrace it. For Sarah, David, and Lily, life had begun to change in ways neither of them had expected. Together, they were discovering that even in the wake of sorrow, it was possible to find warmth, trust, and the beginnings of a new family. The seasons slowly changed, and with them came a quiet sense of renewal in the little household. Spring had arrived, painting the world with soft shades of green and the smell of fresh flowers in the air. Sarah noticed the shift not only outside but inside herself. She no longer felt the constant weight pressing on her heart. The sadness was still there, a quiet whisper, but it no longer defined her days. Love had returned gently, quietly, through the laughter and trust of a small child who needed her as much as she needed to give love. David watched Sarah and Lily interact from the kitchen doorway, a soft smile on his face. The two of them were in the garden, planting flowers in a small patch of soil. Lily carefully placed each seed into the dirt and Sarah guided her hands, showing her how to pat the soil gently. "There," Sarah said softly. "Now we wait for them to grow, just like we wait for good things in life." Lily looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes, and Sarah felt a deep warmth spread through her chest. The little girl had come to rely on her, and Sarah realized that she had come to rely on Lily as well. David joined them, kneeling in the dirt to help Lily water the plants. "You two make a good team," he said, smiling. "I think these flowers are going to grow faster with all this love." Sarah laughed quietly, a sound that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. She realized how much had changed since the day she had first knocked on David's door, whispering about her baby and asking to love someone else's child. That day had felt impossible, like stepping into a storm, but now she was part of something gentle, steady, and full of meaning. Evenings became their favorite time of day. After dinner, they would sit together on the couch, sharing stories, reading books, or simply talking about their day. Lily would curl up between them, sometimes resting her head on Sarah's lap, sometimes leaning against David's shoulder. These moments, simple and ordinary, carried a depth of love and trust that words could not fully capture. Sarah often found herself staring at the little girl, amazed at how much life could be contained in such small hands and bright eyes. Sarah's grief had transformed. She still thought of her own daughter often, remembering the tiny details, the softness of her skin, the sound of her gentle cries, the warmth of her small hands. But these memories no longer left her paralyzed. Instead, they became a part of her story, a quiet foundation that allowed her to understand the depth of love she was now capable of giving. She had learned that loving again did not mean forgetting, that grief and joy could coexist side by side, teaching her to appreciate life in a fuller way. One afternoon, David suggested a trip to the park. It was a warm, sunny day, and the air smelled of fresh grass and blooming flowers. Lily ran ahead, laughing, and Sarah followed, smiling at the sight of pure, unguarded joy. They played on the swings, chased butterflies, and even fed some ducks by the pond. Sarah felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. She realized that this was what healing felt like, not the absence of pain, but the ability to embrace life despite it. During the walk home, Sarah noticed Lily holding her hand tightly. "I love you, Sarah," the little girl said, her voice full of sincerity. Sarah's eyes welled with tears and she hugged Lily close. "I love you too, Lily," she whispered. "More than you can imagine." David walked beside them, silently grateful for the bond that had formed, watching as their small family took steps toward a shared future. Challenges still arose, as they always would in life. Sarah sometimes felt moments of doubt, wondering if she was truly doing enough, questioning whether she could ever fully belong. David noticed these thoughts in her expression and offered quiet reassurance. "You are enough," he said one evening as they watched Lily sleep. "You've brought love, joy, and patience into her life. That is more than enough." Sarah nodded, comforted by his words, feeling the strength of his trust and support. Sarah also began to open up more about her feelings with David. She spoke of her fears, her lingering sadness, and even moments when she felt guilty for smiling or feeling joy. David listened without interruption, offering gentle words and understanding, never judgment. Their conversations became a safe space, a place where emotions could be shared honestly. Through these talks, Sarah learned that true healing often required both vulnerability and connection, and that trust, once established, could carry them through even the hardest moments. They celebrated milestones together, creating small traditions that bonded them even further. Birthdays, Holidays and ordinary days became occasions for laughter, love, and shared memories. On Lily's third birthday, Sarah and David worked together to make a small cake, decorate the living room, and prepare little gifts. Lily's excitement was contagious, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt the joy of creating happiness for someone else. The day ended with Sarah tucking Lily into bed, the little girl whispering, "Thank you, Sarah, for being here." Sarah kissed her forehead, feeling a full heart for the first time in a long while. As spring gave way to summer, the three of them continued to grow closer. They took trips to the library, spent afternoons at the playground, and had picnics in the park. Each shared experience strengthened the bond they had begun to form, creating a sense of stability and love that Sarah had never imagined possible. She realized that life could be fragile, but it could also be filled with warmth, trust, and beauty. One quiet evening, Sarah found herself sitting on the porch with David after Lily had gone to bed. The sky was painted in shades of purple and gold, the air warm and comforting. Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the loss that had felt insurmountable, the fear of reaching out to someone new, the first hesitant steps into David's home. She felt gratitude, not only for the love she had found but for the resilience that had allowed her to keep moving forward even when it felt impossible. David sat beside her, gently taking her hand. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "And you've helped us both more than you know." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "I think we've helped each other," she replied. "Lily has helped me heal, and you've shown me that love can still grow even after loss." David nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. They shared a silence that was comfortable, full of unspoken trust and mutual respect. The next morning, Sarah woke with a renewed sense of purpose. She had learned to live with grief, not as a shadow that controlled her life, but as a companion that reminded her of her capacity to love deeply. She embraced the little moments, Lily's laughter, the warmth of sunlight on the porch, the simple pleasure of reading a story aloud. Each day became a step toward living fully again, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. David noticed these changes too. He saw Sarah's confidence growing, her ability to care for Lily with gentle authority and love. He felt a deep gratitude for her presence, understanding that the choice to open their lives to one another had created a new kind of family, a family not defined by biology, but by love, trust, and shared experiences. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, Lily pointed to the flowers they had planted months before. "Look, Sarah, they're growing," she exclaimed. Sarah knelt beside her, brushing dirt from Lily's hands. "Yes, they are," she said softly. "Just like us, we're growing too every day." Lily smiled, understanding the simple truth in the words. David watched them, feeling a quiet sense of peace. This was what life could be, challenging, yes, but also filled with hope, love, and connection. The days continued, each one adding to the bond they shared. Birthdays were celebrated, ordinary mornings were cherished, and small gestures of love became the foundation of their new life together. Sarah found joy not in grand events but in the everyday moments, tying Lily's shoes, reading bedtime stories, sharing quiet smiles over tea. Each act was a thread weaving them closer, creating a tapestry of trust and love that was both delicate and strong. Sarah's grief never fully disappeared, but it no longer defined her. She had learned to carry it with grace, letting it coexist with the joy she now felt. She understood that loss could teach empathy, patience, and resilience. And most importantly, she had learned that love could bloom again, in unexpected ways, through the small, steady acts of care she shared with David and Lily. One quiet evening, Sarah tucked Lily into bed, watching the little girl's eyes close as she drifted into sleep. She whispered softly, "You will always have a place in my heart, little one." It was a promise, not just to Lily but to herself, a commitment to embrace love even after loss, to honor the past while living fully in the present. David stood in the doorway, watching them. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and peace. Their lives had been shaped by loss and hardship, but together they had found a way to heal, to create joy, and to build a family based on love. He knew the journey was ongoing, but for the first time the future felt bright, filled with possibilities rather than fear. In the quiet of that evening, the three of them sat together in the living room, the world outside slowly fading into night. Sarah held Lily's hand, David held hers, and for a moment the past seemed distant. The present was full of warmth, love, and hope, a reminder that even in the wake of tragedy, life could offer second chances, new beginnings, and the quiet beauty of healing hearts. Together they had discovered that love is resilient. It can survive loss, grow in unexpected places, and create a family not bound by circumstances, but by trust, care, and unwavering devotion. And in that realization, Sarah, David, and Lily found not only joy, but the kind of peace that comes from knowing that even broken hearts can mend, and even after the darkest nights, the sun can rise again.